There's no doubt that Trump is the favorite to win the 2024 election, and today we're going to take a look at his path to the White House and the three states that he must win if he wants to get to the 270 electoral votes needed to secure the presidency. We're going to start off with the least competitive states, the safe states for both Harris and Trump, and then we're going to slowly get into those closer races, and I'm going to show you exactly what needs to happen for Trump to be able to cross 270. If he doesn't do that, he's not returning to the White House. So we're going to begin with the safe blue states for Harris: Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. And for Trump, we have Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, nearly all of Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, the 2nd District of Maine, Alaska, and even Iowa and Ohio, 2 states that were more competitive in the last 2 elections, but Trump is on track to carry by at least 12 points this time around. So basically, fundamentally, Trump is going to have to win his solid states, which he is almost guaranteed to do. There's basically no chance that he loses even a single one of these states. These are all states he's won easily in both of the last 2 elections, and so with just the solid states filled in, Trump leads with 149 electoral votes to Harris's 139. We're now going to get into the likely states that will go for either candidate by margins between 5 to 12 percentage points. The likely states for Trump, these are states he must win. There's basically no getting around them. And a big reason for that is just because of how valuable they are electorally. And probably the most obvious one is, of course, Texas. 40 electoral votes. It is a safe red state. It's a state that Republicans haven't lost since 1976. Jimmy Carter was the last Democrat to win Texas 48 years ago. Now, looking at the 2016 and 2020 elections, Trump hasn't been able to win the Lone Star State by the biggest of margins, but there's no doubt he's the favorite in 2024. He's probably going to win it by nearly a double-digit margin, maybe even 10 to 12 points. Probably not going to go over 12, but it's going to be an easy victory nonetheless. I mean, in 2020, Joe Biden and the Democrats were putting in hundreds of millions of dollars into advertising in Texas with the hopes of flipping the state. That didn't even really come close to happening. It's definitely not going to happen in 2024. And the other likely red state, and it's really good for Republicans that is no longer competitive, and that is, of course, Florida. 30 electoral votes. It has the 3rd most electoral votes of any state on this map, only behind California and Texas. It has overtaken New York in the most recent cycle of redistricting. And so in the Sunshine State, this used to be a hyper competitive state. In 2012, it was the closest state in the entire election. This was also the case back in 2000. 2004, Bush did pretty well. 2008, even when Obama won 365 electoral votes, Florida was still decided by a 2-point margin. Now, Trump did carry the state in both 2016 and 2020, and he's basically guaranteed to do so again. Even since just 2020, Florida has taken a significant shift to the right. It is now very much a Republican state. Trump probably isn't going to win it by a solid margin, but he can definitely scrape by with something in the range of 5 to 8 points ahead of Harris. Before I continue, only 11% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. We're now going to get into the likely states for Kamala Harris. If she loses even just one of these states, it's basically game over. We can call the election, Trump's going to get reelected. So Kamala Harris really has to win these states, and we're going to begin in Colorado, where we have 10 electoral votes that were easily won by Biden in 2020. He carried the state by nearly 14 points. That margin is basically going to be cut in half this time around. We also have the Empire State of New York. New York is almost always a solid blue state. I mean, do you remember the last time that a Democrat didn't win it by more than 12 points? I mean, you would have to go all the way back to the election of 1988. Ever since 1992, New York has been solid blue in every single presidential election. Joe Biden carried by 23 points in 2020, same margin Clinton won it by in 2016. However, Democrats are not popular there right now. We had Andrew Cuomo, we had Kathy Hochul, Eric Adams, all of them were unpopular, all of them highly disliked. And so that's really going to have an impact here. Kamala Harris is currently on track to winning the state by just 10 points, based on the polling average. New Jersey is also going to be significantly more competitive. The state simply isn't where it was 4 years ago when Biden won it by 16 points. Bob Menendez has had a huge impact. He is a sitting senator that has been indicted on multiple counts of bribery charges. He's still in office. He plans to resign soon, but the race to replace him is very competitive, much more competitive than a safe blue state like New Jersey should be. And so in this election cycle, it's going to be a lot more competitive than it typically is. Maine is also going to be likely blue. This isn't really too consequential of a state. It only has 2 electoral votes and then 2 more from the individual districts. But Democrats generally win the state of Maine at large. And so it's going to be likely for Kamala Harris. And finally, we have the state of Minnesota. Tim Walz, as her running mate, is probably going to be able to give her the boost that she needs to win the state by a likely margin. It's probably going to be decided by just over 5 points. Walz honestly didn't win by the biggest margin in 2022 when he won re-election as governor. Gretchen Whitmer won re-election in Michigan, which is a significantly more competitive state. She won by a double-digit margin, while Walz only carried his state by 8. And so he will probably help Harris there. It's not going to be a safe blue state, not even going to be close to that, but it is going to be pretty difficult for Trump to defeat Harris in a state where her running mate is the literal sitting governor. We now have 116 electoral votes worth of states left. It is these states that are going to decide the election. I'm going to start off by filling in the lean Harris states so that we can focus on those 3 states I mentioned earlier that Trump absolutely has to win if he wants to win the 2024 election. And so the first lean state for Harris is New Mexico. Hispanic voters are shifting to the right, and that's what makes up a majority of the New Mexican electorate. The state is going to be closer than it was last time when Biden won by 11 points. We also have New Hampshire, which was surprisingly competitive in 2016. Trump came within half a percentage point of actually flipping it. Joe Biden did carry it by 7 in 2020. We're probably going to see a margin in the middle of the last 2 Democratic performances. And finally, we have Virginia. Kamala Harris is still a favorite here. It is among the most competitive states now, even though last time Biden was able to come out with a double-digit victory. In fact, if Biden had stayed in the race and didn't drop out, Donald Trump would probably be the favorite to win the Commonwealth of Virginia, which did elect a Republican governor just 1 year after Biden was elected president. So it really isn't as blue as it was in the last election cycle, and that's why it will be placed in the lean Democratic category. We're now going to get into the lean states for Trump, and before we get into the 3 that he absolutely has to win, I'm going to fill in the 2nd district of Nebraska, which is currently favored to go to the former president, as well as North Carolina. It's basically a given that Trump is going to win the Tar Heel state. He even carried it in 2020 when nobody thought that he was going to hold on to it. Most people expected Biden to flip it before he flipped Georgia, but instead the opposite happened. Georgia actually went blue, North Carolina remained red. And so at this point, Trump has already picked up every state he won in 2020. There's basically no way he's going to do worse than he did 4 years ago. And so now we're going to get into the 3 states that he must win if he wants to win the election, because realistically, this is probably the worst case scenario right now for Trump if Kamala Harris wins every other remaining state and Trump comes out with 236 electoral votes. He really couldn't do any worse than this, but now we're going to get into the states that he needs to win if he wants to win the election as a whole. So I'm going to begin with Georgia. This is probably the most conservative out of the 3. Trump won the Peach State by 5% in 2016. However, Biden was able to very narrowly flip it in 2020. It was among the closest states in the entire election. It was actually the closest state, along with Wisconsin and Arizona as the other 2 tilt races. And so this year, Georgia is much more favorable for Trump. He leads by around 4 points in the polling against Kamala Harris. However, if Trump doesn't win Georgia, he's probably not going to do well in many of these remaining states. And so it's not that Georgia is a state that he has to win because its electoral votes are particularly valuable. If Trump won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, he would still get over 270 without Georgia, but it is much more likely that he does it starting with Georgia. So Georgia is the first out of the 3 must-win states for Trump. The second state that Trump must win is going to be Arizona, another state that was decided by less than 1% in the last election. 0.31 was the margin for Biden, and with Trump doing so much better than he was 4 years ago, he is the heavy favorite to win here. He's probably going to take it by a 2 to 3 point margin, and again, it is a must-win state for Donald Trump. And so basically his strategy, his pathway to the White House lies in the Sun Belt. He's going to have to win Florida and Texas, in which he's basically guaranteed to win. He's also the overwhelmingly heavy favorite in North Carolina, and he should win Georgia and Arizona. And so Nevada is not going to provide him with enough electoral votes to get 270. He's basically one short, even if he wins the silver state. So it's not going to be a required state. However, Wisconsin is. Wisconsin is typically seen as the most conservative out of the three blue wall states, which consists of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And so Wisconsin is going to be the last state that Trump has to win if he wants to win the election. Joe Biden also carried Wisconsin by a tilt margin, and it's not going to be too difficult for Trump to win it back, considering he became the first Republican to win Wisconsin in 28 years when he won the state against Hillary Clinton in 2016. So it was a big victory. Trump has really done very well in the Midwest. If you look at the Midwest before Trump came into the picture in 2012, this was what the Midwest looked like. Nearly every single state was blue. 4 years later, almost the entire region is red, with the exception of Illinois and Minnesota, where Clinton barely scraped by with a victory. And so, with the victory in Wisconsin, Trump will be up at 273 electoral votes. It's going to be Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin. These are the three most important states for Donald Trump. Now, if he's able to win these three states, he's also basically guaranteed to win Nevada. Nevada's probably going to vote to the right of Wisconsin at the very least, maybe even to the right of Arizona. Michigan and Pennsylvania, though, are going to be very competitive. Probably the most likely scenario right now is Pennsylvania being tilted Republican. Michigan could honestly go both ways, but for the sake of this map, I'm going to give it to Trump. He could definitely win the state. He won it back in 2016. Kamala Harris choosing Minnesota Governor Tim Walz isn't going to help her too much in states like Michigan or Pennsylvania. If she had gone with Shapiro, Pennsylvania would probably be blue and Michigan as well. But with Walz on the ticket, it's not going to do too much. So as of right now, Trump is still the heavy favorite, but his pathway to 270 lies with Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, his three key must-win states. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. And join my Discord server, link in the description below.